The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network. Hello, and welcome to the Healthcare Facilities Network. I am your host, Peter Martin, president of Gosselin Martin Associates. The Healthcare Facilities Network is a vehicle that we are using here at Gosselin Martin Associates to promote that the field of healthcare facilities management exists. And I'm very happy today to welcome my first two guests to a Zoom, our first Zoom recording. In the past, you've seen just me, but now we have guests, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a quick second. But today's episode, we're just rolling out the Healthcare Facilities Network. It's going out to the market. And I thought one of the things we should really do, and since the Healthcare Facilities Network aims to reach all those who are presently in the profession, all the way down to high school kids who may be considering a career. So everybody in between. And so that's a wide spectrum. And when you have a wide spectrum, you have to give a baseline of knowledge. I thought, you know what? We should probably start fundamentally. What does a healthcare facility director do? And to do that, I enlisted help of two professionals. And I would like them to introduce themselves to you. Let's go to Alison Brisson first. Alison, welcome.
Thank you, Peter. Happy to be here today. So I'm Alison Brisson. I am the Vice President of Support Services and Facilities for Cambridge Health Alliance in Massachusetts. And I've spent 17 years in healthcare. Before that, I was in hospitality. So I'm one of those that have made a pivot from one industry to another, kind of mid-career, and happy to chat about that today if you'd like. And just welcoming everybody to this session. Thank you.
Awesome. My pleasure. Thank you. And I think Alison and you and I have talked about this before. I'm glad you brought up the hospitality background because, and you can speak to it better as we go through, but that gave you that soft skill base. And so anyways, hospitality is not a bad launching point into facilities. Our next guest, Robert Hacker. Could you introduce yourself, please, Robert?
Yes. Good morning. Thanks, Pete and Alison. My name is Robert Hacker. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning, Design, and Construction for a two-hospital system out here in Southern California. Like Alison, I also have transitioned from one career to another. I started off in the military, and I went from the military to aerospace, and then transferred from aerospace into healthcare. And I've now been in healthcare for about 26 years. So that's what I do.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you both joining me and taking a leap of faith onto a Zoom call. It's interesting because we were joking before I started to record. Both Alison and Robert had reached out to me and said, hey, what questions would you like us to, what would you like us to talk about? And that's what you would expect from a facilities professional because you're always prepared. And I purposely said to them, I really want to keep it open, whatever is on your mind to kind of set that foundation because we can't answer this question in 30 minutes. But I said to them, I only have one question and the launching point we go to from there. What does a healthcare facility director do? And everybody answers that probably a little bit differently. So Alison, let's go to you first. What is the role of a healthcare facility director?
Sure. So I like to use this analogy. So a healthcare facilities director or manager for that matter, is really the primary care provider of the physical environment. So the buildings, the structure, the grounds, all of the things that we need to have in place for care to be provided within. So we basically make sure that there's airflow, there's water, there is the correct built environment to be able to serve whatever type of care is being given within a particular facility. And, I say that there are several different types of facilities, so we don't have to go into all of that, but there might be a business office or a hospital, a physician office, an ambulatory care center, and they all have different requirements and needs. So we're the ones that keep kind of the heartbeat going of these buildings, and then also plan for new buildings to be built, and ensure that we're meeting the regulatory requirements as well as the requirements of the end users. And, that's essentially what we do. And much of the day is even explaining to others what we do and why, and what we need to do and why, so that they can, understand and help us get our jobs done during the day, so that they can in turn get their work done as well. So that's it. We're the primary care provider of the physical environment.
I like that. The primary care provider of the physical environment.
Yes.
Very good. Robert, how about you?
Well, like Allison, what we do is we take care of the buildings and the infrastructure to make sure that that building's living, it's breathing, it's operating the way we anticipate it to operate. We use a lot of the same healthcare techniques that we look at the human being, and we utilize those on the equipment to make sure that the equipment is functioning properly, and we get the, I hate to say it this way, the expected life expectancy out of that equipment. In my role, what I do probably the most of anything is I'm going around, and I look at it that I'm educating people, I'm teaching people, I'm explaining what's going on, why we have to do things, why we can't do certain things. And that's not always just with the end users. That's with some of my colleagues. That's sometimes it's front level staff, and sometimes it's our senior staff. Why can't I do X? And I go, because it's against the law. But why can't we? And we can have that debate. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I do is that education. I feel, and Pete, you've known me for years. And people refer to me sometimes as, you're more of a professor, you're talking to people, you're explaining, you're educating them. So I think that's the primary thing that I'm doing.
So it's interesting to me about both of your answers is you both touched on educating and teaching. And so this, if somebody's in the field or if somebody's doing what you're doing, that there's dual skill sets that you need, and you need them both equally. But if there's somebody who's thinking about this as a career path and they hear, director of engineering, director of facilities management, vice president of facilities, their mind may go to the technical first, not necessarily to the education and teaching component. How big and how important and how often are you out there educating and teaching? And what skills do you need to do that a person may not think of is needed for healthcare facilities management?
I'm happy to jump in. So I think that I personally think that it's probably more 60% of kind of the education and leading people through what needs to be done. So, and then probably 40% technical. And I say that in that typically you have a complement of staff that have the technical skills that are going to be your HVAC technicians, your electricians, et cetera. You do need to know the right questions to ask. But a majority of my day really is explaining. Earlier today, I actually was at one of our sites, and we have a lot of behavioral health patients, and they can do some significant damage to the spaces. But I think that sometimes it's just explaining to the clinical team, okay, if this component gets damaged, that means that we have to shut down this wing. That means that we're displacing then 8 patients because we, had one patient do this type of damage to this, section of the building. So, and explaining that in a way that's not confrontational. That's just, we all want the end result to be excellent care for the patients, but explaining it in a way that they understand and say, oh, geez, we don't want that to happen. So how do we come up with creative solutions to ensure that our spaces are there and available for the care that needs to be delivered? So, that type of conversation happens often. I'm sure it happens out in California as well.
Never. I'll jump in my opinion, and just to let everybody know, before we had this podcast, I actually went to some of my team and I asked them, what do you think I do? And I wanted to get their feedback because their view may be different than what my view is. But overwhelmingly, they said, you're educating us. You're letting us know why, the reasons why, not the technical, how to turn the wrench. We can get into that if we need to, but it's really much more, why are we doing it? Why do we run the generators? Why do we test the batteries in the generators? Little things like that. So I would say, and this is going to sound funny because it's not going to add up. 80% of my time is something around teaching, educating, explaining. There is a certain portion of managing people that comes into play, which is going to probably be another 10%. So we're up to 90%. Now I still have certain management things that I'm doing for regulatory perspectives, making sure that things are getting done. Although I have a team of people that handle that, I'm still looking over their shoulder just to make sure, or looking at the reports. The other thing I do a lot of, and it kind of comes in with that teaching, is I get my steps in. I average about 10 miles a day walking. People know, I know the staff from the house supervisors all the way down, because I walk it, I get a feel of what's going on. As much as I listen to staff, I also listen to equipment. The equipment will scream to us. We'll understand that when the equipment's in pain, just like people are in pain. So, I'm doing a lot of that. The other thing that I'm also doing, as much as I'm teaching, I'm also learning.
Can I stop you there for a second, though? Because I did, because I need to, I'm slow. So I'm trying to go back to the math component of this. Alison, I liked your 60-40, and I thought that was interesting. You were 60 on the soft side, 40 on the technical side. Are you, Robert, at 80-10-10? Meaning 80% is the educating, 10% is the employee man, the people management, and then 10% is the technical. Are you as low as 10 on the technical side?
I would say yes, but you also have to remember part of that technical side rolls back into that education.
Yep.
So it's hard to really delineate because they do cross over.
Sure.
If I can continue, I also talk about, my own learning and growing. So I'm constantly reading different publications, ASHE, Becker's, etc., ACHE, what's going on out there. I'm also talking to my peers. I spend more time talking to my peers on what they did that failed than what they did successfully. I focus much more on how it failed so that I can at least understand and recognize what maybe not to do. And so that's why I say the technical side is much less. Now, there's another kind of thought process that comes into play, and that's also starting to look at some correlations and drawing correlations, the cause and effect. And I don't know if that's necessarily always a technical aspect, or if that's more on the relationship and understanding, because sometimes it is a mechanical thing that we do. We put this in and we expect this to happen. And that's the physical built environment. But sometimes we then have this.
You say the physical built environment, and Alison, you use that term as well. For somebody who doesn't know, what does the physical built environment mean?
Something that you can physically touch, see and touch. There's things that happen behind the walls that you don't necessarily see. Early in my career, I once had a nurse came to me and said they wanted more electrical outlets. And she wanted another electrical outlet inside her office. And I explained to her, that's not as simple as you might think. She went to Home Depot on the weekend. The next Monday came in and brought me an outlet. And he goes, why can't you just install this? Yeah. It only cost me $2.
Yes.
Now I have to sit down and explain, okay, it just doesn't happen. And the same thing happens also when people complain it's too hot or too cold. All they see is a register up on the ceiling. Just put another one in. Doesn't cold air magically come out of them? Right. And to go through the process to show them how and what we do with air and how it comes in and how we condition the air, how we pull the humidity out. Sometimes it's very technical, but I need to be able to relate that in a way that senior folks can understand and frontline staff can understand.
But you know what, you bring up a good point, relative to Home Depot. And I think Home Depot is a construction project manager's nightmare, because people will go to Home Depot and just say flooring, say it's wooden flooring, or the stuff they used to have. They'll say, hey, how come you can't put this in? I got this at Home Depot. So they're constantly comparing. And I think that brings up a good point. And you both started not in healthcare facilities management. I kind of want to get to that, that your pathway in. But it also sounds like, and Alison, maybe you can talk to this, a component of this job is also investigatory. It's also, you're playing detective quite frequently with something that can't talk back at you, but can make noise at you. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, you can certainly use products from Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever in residential applications and in some commercial applications. However, in a hospital application, we have folks that are patients that are sedated and can't get up and ambulate, move around and leave if there's an emergency. So we have to have a built environment that can sustain emergencies like a fire emergency, etc. So that means that the components that are used to build these buildings are need to withstand fire emergency, for example. So it can't necessarily be something off the shelf from a home goods store. So that is certainly where we have to be investigating. We also, some people might remember MacGyver. Some people may not.
Yes.
I may be aging myself, but
well, we both remember.
Yeah. But we're often, trying to figure out how to resolve kind of a complex problem in a creative way. And sometimes it might be for a short fix until we can put a more permanent fix on. But if you love to, resolve issues or resolve problems or really think outside of the box, and you like to communicate with people, you like to teach and educate, and you would love to keep people safe within your community and help them get the care that they need, then healthcare facilities management is certainly for you.
That sounds like a lot.
It is, but I have to tell you, it is very rewarding. And there are a number of resources to be able to help people navigate, this world of healthcare facilities engineering or management, whatever you'd like to say. And there are professional associations that have resources. As we heard earlier, you build relationships with colleagues to be able to say, hey, did you come across this? How did you resolve this? And it's really a fantastic and rewarding career.
Robert.
One thing I'd also like to stress is we're talking about, at the director level, VP level, and so forth, but somebody who might be coming out of high school or, a few years in their early 20s, and they might want to look at healthcare. I don't want to scare them off by talking about some of these very technical, broad things. And we have our own vocabulary and all of our own acronyms within healthcare that can scare people off. Yeah. We also have the ability to allow people to work down in the plant that really don't interface with anybody else. They're down there, they're working with the equipment and their tools. And sometimes people are happy with that. And maybe they want to start their career into healthcare in a little bit more safe environment. When I say safe, not that it's unsafe, but protected from other employees. I put it that way. That way they can actually work on equipment. If you want to come into the field as an electrician, a plumber, a regular mechanic, somebody who works on beds doesn't have to actually interface with patients. The beds can be brought down to a bed shop and you can work on beds. You might not even necessarily need to see a patient. You can actually work on equipment. And then as you want to progress, then you kind of come out of that cave, you might say, and then start to work your way out.
Well, and that's what I
hope that's an accurate way of describing it.
No, I think it is. And that's where I wanted to ask actually both of you, and Alison from the hospitality, and Robert, you're coming out of the military. Can you guys take yourselves back to it? Because again, the mission of the Healthcare Facilities Network, in addition to hopefully entertaining and educating is also to help fill that pipeline. And not everybody, Alison, congratulations. You started your VP role just about 6 weeks ago now. Not everybody wants to be a VP. Not everybody wants to be a director over 2 hospitals. They don't want to deal with that. Can you guys, though, take yourselves back to when you came into the field, into healthcare facilities, and you weren't at the levels that you are now? What was your expectation of the career, I guess? Did you want to, was your goal to continue to elevate, or was you like, what, this is a career path for me? What was your thought process then? And what would you recommend to somebody who's that high school student or maybe mid-career professional looking for a career? What would you tell them about this field and this role?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to start. So I actually went from hospitality into healthcare as you're never going to believe this, per diem front desk rep. Wow. For a physician practice. So I left a management level, GM level position in hospitality on a leap of faith. A friend of mine was trying to recruit me into healthcare for the longest time. And I said, okay, well, tell me more, and decided to take this opportunity.
Why did your friend target you or try to bring you in, Alison? What did they see in you that thought, hey, this might be for you?
I think it was the leadership technique that I had and skills that I had at that time. And certainly, I think that I've always been a little bit of a people person. So being able to, chat with people and navigate customer service. Mm-hmm. So I decided that really my career in hospitality at that time was just not challenging me anymore. So I thought that it was a good time to make a pivot and learn something new. But I knew that I didn't know what I didn't know, and I needed to learn. Yeah. And so jumped into a front desk rep role, learned the physician practice operations. Within about a month or two, I actually was asked to open a urology practice. So I became a urology practice manager and learned how to be a practice manager, and then went into facilities on the other end when I found that really that was more where my passion was. So anyways, transitioned into facilities management, started out with kind of the offsite ambulatory practices and the physician practices, and then kind of more integrated into the hospital type of setting, and just kind of continued to progress. But it was over a 17-year period. So it was a long, kind of a long time. It was a total second career path, but learned along the way and learned what I liked and what I enjoyed and what I was good at. And then I think probably when I initially went in, I did want to go into leadership. I had no idea at that time, though, that I was going to be, looking for a vice president of support services and facilities position. No idea 17 years ago that would have been the case. But happy that I chose the path. I absolutely love what I do. And it's not without challenge. We should talk, and there's the good, bad, and the ugly. There are challenging days. There are stressful days. But really all in all, it's very, very rewarding.
So you really had, you had a hospitality path, and then you had a practice management path, mm-hmm. and then you had a facilities path. So you really had 1, 2, 3 before you found this particular
That's right.
area. Interesting. Robert, how about you?
Well, I actually went completely opposite. I started off in the military, and I like to joke with people. So, what was I trained to do? To maim and kill. And now I'm on the other side of the world, 180 degrees opposite that. And so, I started off in the military after college. And then after getting out of the military, I did what probably 80-90% of the folks do. I was in the Air Force, by the way. We go into the defense industry, which is very common. And so my first job was actually at the same place where they manufactured the target drones back in the 80s. So I went from shooting at them to now making the drones in the facilities. Well, actually, at that point, it was more of an engineering role that transferred at that point, at that factory, into the facility side. More on the layout side and the production of the target drones. And then I progressed from there into the space shuttle program. And so I was at the factory that built the space shuttle main engines, got to learn all about that. And it was great facilities experience because my product, our patient, didn't talk. It was these big engines. And the biggest learning for me is coming out of clean rooms, thinking, okay, I understand what a class 20,000 clean room is. And now I'm going to go into these ORs, and I'm like, oh, these are going to even be cleaner. And I was dumbfounded. I was actually scared. I'm like, this is not clean. And so I had to kind of change my perspective.
How did you get recruited into healthcare?
I went to a conference, and there were some facilities guys there from healthcare. And
what was the conference? It wasn't the ASHI conference, was it?
It was not the ASHI conference, because ASHI would only have. It was a conference out here in Los Angeles at the convention center, and it was all facility based. So it was non-specific to any industry. And I was just listening to them, and I had never even thought of healthcare and anything other than, and I was very typical, and I hate to say this, the only people that work in hospitals are doctors and nurses. They're right. What does the public see, and what do they think? Right. If you work at a hospital, you're a doctor or you're a nurse. Yeah. Well, there's other jobs. So I was blind to it, so it intrigued me. And so I actually had lunch with him. I was just talking to him, and some of the things that I thought were kind of funny is I have the same amount of toilets and urinals in a large factory, but they're all consolidated in one location. You go to a hospital, they're dispensed out into every patient room. So you have the same infrastructure, but just distributed differently. Did we worry about power outages and having generators and everything else? Of course we did. We had backups to the backups in aerospace. We have the backups and backups in healthcare. So to me, it was a little bit of a lateral move, but a complete different industry. Again, I'll go back to it, the vocabulary was different. The one thing that I would tell you from my perspective, from being in a different industry like that, is healthcare is much more stable. We will talk about it internally as not being stable and all these changes and everything else. But if you look at it compared to other industries, we are very, very stable. Our product, I hate to say it, our product is sick people coming to us. And they're going to continue to come to us. Yes, we want them not to be sick. We want them to live longer and healthier. But the product line is consistent. It's still coming. Where some of the other businesses, when I was in aerospace, the contracts would change. We got out of the space shuttle business and we were going to go in a different. So there's fundamental shifts that occur.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we talk about that all the time, the stability of the field, even amidst the craziness that's out there, it's still stable, and it will continue to be, because as you both know, and it's the reason we're doing this, is we need people, because there just aren't enough of them, and people aren't going to stop getting sick. I want to focus on one last area. And as I said at the beginning, we can't focus on everything, but the beauty of this channel is we can always come back to issues. You've talked about a number of areas that you participate in healthcare management. One of the areas, and this is the same if you are if you were a tradesperson or you're a vice president, is can you talk a little bit about risk and life and death and kind of that part of your job? Because that's also, and when I say life and death, that's not hyperbolic, because it can be life or death. So can you talk a little bit about, for somebody who, they may not know the field or what you do, talk a little bit about risk, life and death, and keeping people within that physical environment safe. Alison, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned that earlier around the built environment and the materials that go into that to be able to sustain during a fire emergency. So that's just one example of keeping people safe and alive during an emergency situation. But there are a number of other things. There are, we have to keep infections down. So we have surgical cases that are happening, right? And part of the physical environment that we discussed earlier was heating and cooling and air changes, et cetera. And we also heard a little bit about clean rooms. So it's, making sure that our spaces, as I had said earlier too, are appropriate for the care that's being delivered. So, and it can be life or death. Somebody could have a surgery, they could get an infection because an air handler is not working appropriately, or somehow there was an infection that got into, or a bacteria that got into a water system. There are things that we do need to do to be sure that the space is safe. And also, we heard a little bit about emergency generators too. So as much as we don't like to say it, sometimes we lose power. There are storms, and certainly
Really?
here in the Northeast, we have nor'easters, and throughout the country, no matter where you are or around the world, there are risks. And so what we do is really try to ensure that our structures and our systems minimize the risk to patients so that harm isn't caused. So that if we do lose normal power, we have backup and redundancy to be able to ensure that whatever procedure they're having can continue safely. So that's just, a few examples. And so it is important work. And that's why I kind of relate it back to we're the doctors of the physical environment, and keeping the physical environment alive so that our real doctors and nurses can keep the patients alive.
I like that. I like that saying.
Let me jump in with a risk, because I think that's probably one of the things that I deal with the most on a day-to-day basis, and what risk is to each person. And we can break risk down into a construction project versus an operations project. I'll have guys come to me and say, we need to replace an air handler. The air handler is now 35 years old. I said, okay, what's not working on it? Well, it's old. Okay, I have gray hair. Okay, do you need to replace me too?
Some days the answer might be yes. Right?
I agree, but sometimes we'll look at it and say, and I will actually have senior people come to me. What are you going to do to prevent us from having a power outage next time?
Yeah.
And that's a real world scenario. You know what? We lose power. The generators come on. I transfer power in about 8 seconds. I know I have 10 seconds to be able to bring it up into transfer. I can do that, with no problem whatsoever. But now that we're on emergency power, now I have doctors, I have, C-suite level people breathing down my neck. Can you guarantee that we're not going to have another power outage? And I tell them, absolutely no, I cannot guarantee it. I can guarantee you we will have another power outage. And that's hard for them to accept. What are you doing about it, Robert? And so sometimes when we look at it, at what point are we willing to take a risk? And sometimes we get handcuffed and worried because of the risk that's associated with some of our actions. An example might be that whole thing about a generator. Do we start another case if we're only on one source of power? Well, if it's an emergent case and it's if they don't have it, the patient's going to die. You might want to say, okay, we understand that we're only on one source of power and we're going to need to progress. Now, if that case just so happened to be, and I'm just throwing it hypothetically out there, a plastic surgery case, maybe we can delay that case and do it, next week, the next day, next month. But if it's emergent and it needs to be done right now, otherwise the person would not survive, then we have to take that risk. And then all of a sudden, okay, well, when it transfers back, are we going to have issues? There's possibilities that we'll have issues when we move back from emergency power to normal power. So that's just on that kind of a risk. But if I were to go back a little bit to try to open this field up for some of those who might be younger in the high school or the early 20s, one of the things that I try to educate people on is how a hospital's built. And I try to tell them in visual terms. I said, the hospital's like a submarine. When the submarine is underwater and there's a breach, what are we going to do? We're going to close the hatches. And so only that breach will be affected. It won't take down the rest of the submarine. We do the same thing with the hospital. We build it in these compartments. So if a fire were to break out, we can contain it within a certain area, get the people, the patients and the staff out of there. The doors close, and we can let the systems suppress the fire and then let the firefighters come in. But we can keep the rest of the hospital operating, just like that submarine underwater, because you can't just always come up to the surface and get everybody out. So we have to be able to operate even when the unthinkables happen.
Excellent, excellent. So yes or no answer. Final question. Yes or no. Does a hospital facility manager, director, do they interact with everybody in that hospital organization pretty much? Are they touching at one point in their career, or at one point of the day, are they touching everybody from the front desk receptionist all the way to the doc and the ER and everybody in between?
Can you rephrase that from an HR perspective?
How about interacting?
There you go. Go ahead, Alison.
My answer is yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yes, there is the potential to, but you also could work years and never interact with a particular staff member of a hospital. So yes and no.
Thank you. So that's a good use of the yes and no. Robert, yes or no?
I think this comes down a little bit more to personality and what people are doing. I interface with just about everybody. Most everybody, they know me because they need something or they want something from me. I hate to say it that way. But I do walk around on the floors every morning when I first come in. I check in with almost every nurse station in our house. I check in with the house supervisor every day just to see what the pulse is. Anything happened last night? Is there? And because of that, when they come around, they see me, they understand. Believe it or not, I know one of our cooks that's inside our cafeteria. And so I just check in with him. I say, how are you doing today? His name just so happens to be Robert. And so it's kind of interesting because I will get feedback sometimes where I wasn't anticipating it. And what I mean by that is just recently, he was telling me, my grill doesn't seem to be as hot. Now, I just so happen to be getting my breakfast. So what is that telling me? Okay, something's happening with his equipment. He doesn't know what it is, but he can sense there's something wrong with it because it's taking him longer to cook. So that's where I say I get involved with just about everybody, whether it's a valet. In the morning, I say hello to a security officer, a nurse. And then I also try to interface with not only with the patients, but the visitors when they come.
Sure.
I know I'm taking a little bit more time, but one of the things that
it was a yes or no.
This is a secret that I do. And I hate to say this because I'm going to tell you my secret. Whenever I see a caregiver, whether it's a transporter, whether it's a nurse, a physician, and they're taking care of, whether it be a patient or a family member, say a transporter's bringing somebody out, they have, a new baby. And when I stop them, I say, oh, is he taking care of you or is she taking care of you? And they say, yeah. I said, did you know that they're one of the best? And that just sets that expectation in that patient or that visitor's mind that they're being taken care of specially.
Yeah.
So yes, I would say I do get involved with just about everybody. But if the generator is firing and we don't have power, I might not have time to talk to anybody when I'm going to find out what's going on.
Sure. Yeah, you're going right there. Well, I want to thank my two guests on the inaugural launch of What Does a Healthcare Facility Director Do? Alison Brisson, Vice President, Facilities and Support Services, Cambridge Health Alliance, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Robert Hacker, Director of Facilities and Planning, Design, and Construction for Community Memorial Hospital in Ojai. See, I got it right that time. Ojai. Ojai? Whatever.
Ventura's the first one. The second one's Ojai.
Okay, can you give me a Ventura, California? I appreciate the time that both of you have spent with me today. I'm Peter Martin from Gosselin Martin Associates for the Healthcare Facilities Network. Thank you for tuning in, and we will be back in the future with another episode. Have a wonderful day.